Hello everybody, welcome back to another part of studying the economic and social life and cultural developments during the Mughal rule. We're going to start with the passage cultural developments. There was an outburst of many sided cultural activity in India under the Mughal rule. The traditions in the field of architecture, painting, literature, and music created during this period set a norm and deeply influenced the succeeding generations. In this sense, the Mughal period can be called a second classical age following the Gupta age in northern India. In this cultural development, Indian traditions were amalgamated with the Turco-Iranian culture brought to the country by the Mughals. The Timurid court at Samarkand had developed as the cultural center of West and Central Asia. Babur was conscious of this cultural heritage. He was critical of many of the cultural forms existing in India and was determined to set proper standards. The development of art and culture in various regions of India during the 14th and 15th centuries has led to a rich and varied development from which it was possible to draw upon. But for this, the cultural efflorescence of the Mughal age would hardly have been possible. People from different areas of India, as well as people belonging to different faiths and races, contributed to the cultural development in various ways. It's kind of trying to show how the diversity in the Mughal uh, era was taking place and how people from different cultures mixed up and how the new architecture, literature, music was formed in the Mughal era. In this sense, the culture developed during the period was tending towards a truly national culture. Architecture. The Mughals built magnificent forts, palaces, gates, public buildings, mosques, baulis, water tank or well, etc. They also laid out many formal gardens with running water. In fact, use of running water even in their palaces and pleasure resorts was a special feature of the Mughals. Babur was very fond of gardens and laid out a few in the neighborhood of Agra and Lahore. Some of the Mughal gardens such as the Nishad Bagh garden in Kashmir, Shalimar at Lahore, Pinjore garden in the Punjab foothills, etc. have survived to this day. A new impetus to architecture was given by Sher Shah. His famous mausoleum at Sasaram, Bihar, and his mosque in the old fort at Delhi are considered architectural marvels. They form the climax of the pre-Mughal style of architecture and the starting point of the new. Akbar was the first Mughal ruler who had the time and means to undertake construction on a large scale. He built a series of forts, the most famous of which is the Fort of Agra. Built in red sandstone, this massive fort had many magnificent gates. The climax of fort building was reached at Delhi, where Shah Jahan built his famous Red Fort. In 1572, Akbar commenced a palace cum fort complex at Fatehpur Sikri, 36 kilometers from Agra, which he completed in 8 years. Built atop a hill along with a large artificial lake, it included many buildings in the style of Gujarat and Bengal. These included deep caves, balconies, and fanciful kiosks. In the Panch Mahal, built for taking the air, all the types of pillars used in various temples were employed to support flat roofs. The Gujarat style of architecture is used most widely in the palace built probably for his Rajput wife or wives. Buildings of a similar type were also built in the fort of Agra, though only a few of them have survived. Akbar took a close personal interest in the work of construction at Agra and Fatehpur Sikri. Persian or Central Asian influence can be seen in the glazed blue tiles used for decoration in the walls or for tilling the roofs. But the most magnificent building was the mosque and the gateway to it called the Buland Darwaza or the Lofty Gate. Built to commemorate Akbar's victory in Gujarat. The gate is in the style of what is called half dome portal. What was a dome was to slice a dome into half. The sliced portion provided the massive outward facade of the gate, while the smaller doors could be made into the rear wall where the dome and the floor meet. This device, borrowed from Iran, became a common feature in the Mughal buildings later. With the consolidation of the empire, the Mughal architecture reached its climax towards the end of the Jahangir's reign. Began the practice of putting up buildings entirely of marble and decorating the walls with floral designs made of semi-precious stones. This method of decoration, called Petra Dura, became even more popular under Shah Jahan, who used it on a large scale in Taj Mahal. Justly regarded as a jewel of the builder's art, the Taj Mahal brought together in a pleasing manner all the architectural forms developed by the Mughals. Humayun's tomb, built at Delhi towards the beginning of the Akbar's reign, and which had a massive dome of marble, may be considered a precursor of the Taj. The double dome was another feature of this building. The device enabled a bigger dome to be built with a smaller one inside. The chief glory of the Taj is the massive dome and the floor slender minarets linking and the four slender minarets linking the platform to the main building. The decorations are kept to a minimum. Delicate marble screens, Petra Dora inlay work, and kiosks, chhatris adding to the effect. The building gains by being placed in the midst of a formal garden. Mosque building also reached its climax under Shah Jahan, the two most noteworthy ones being the Moti Masjid in the Agra fort, built like the Taj entirely in marble, and the other Jama Masjid at Delhi, built in red sandstone. So this was during Shah Jahan's reign. A lofty gate, tall, slender minarets, and a series of domes are a feature of the Jama Masjid. Although not many buildings were put up by Aurangzeb, who was economy minded, the Mughal architecture traditions based on the combination of Hindu and Turco-Iranian forms and decorative designs continued without a break into the 18th and the early 19th century. Thus, Mughal traditions influenced the palaces and forts of many provincial and local kingdoms. Even the Golden Temple of the Sikhs at Amritsar a rebuilt was rebuilt several times during the period. Even the Golden Temple of the Sikhs at Amritsar, which was rebuilt several times during the period, was built on the arch and dome principle and incorporated many features of the Mughal traditions of architecture. So this was something which was inculcated into the architecture from the Mughals, the dome structures and the arch principle. The painting. The Mughals made a distinctive contribution in the field of painting. They introduced new themes depicting the court, battle scenes, and the chase, and added new colors and new forms. They created a living tradition of paintings which continued to work in different parts of the country long after the glory of the Mughal had disappeared. The richness of the style again was due to the fact that India had an old tradition of paintings. While no palm leaves older than the 12th century have survived to indicate the style of painting, the wall paintings of Ajanta are an eloquent indication of its vigor. After the 8th century, the tradition seemed to have decayed, but palm leaf manuscripts and illustrated Jain text from the 13th century onward show that the tradition had not died. So these were palm leaf paintings, which were a part of the Indian tradition right from the 8th century, I guess. And the palm leaf manuscripts and the Jan text are somewhat indicating us towards the rich culture we had. Apart from the Jains, some of the provincial kingdoms such as Malwa and Gujarat extended their patronage to paintings during the 15th century. But a vigorous revival began only under Akbar, while at the court of Shah of Iran, Humayun had taken into his service two master painters who accompanied him to India. Under their leadership during the reign of Akbar, painting was organized in one of the imperial establishments, Karkhanas. A large number of painters from different parts of the country were invited, many of them from lowly castes. From the beginning, both Hindus and Muslims joined in the work. Thus, Jaswant and Dasavan were two of the famous painters of Akbar's court. So, the famous painters of Akbar's court are Jaswant and Dasavan. The school developed rapidly and soon became a celebrated center of production. Apart from illustrating Persian books of fables, The painters were soon assigned the task of illustrating the Persian text of Mahabharata, the historical work Akbarnama, and the other Indian themes and Indian scenes and landscapes thus came in vogue and helped to free the school from Persian influence. So, the epic of Mahabharata was translated into Persian as we have read earlier, and as the influence and as the patronage for painting grew, uh, after illustrating a lot of Persian books and fables, the painters actually started to design and started to illustrate their works of Mahabharat and Akbarnama and some other Indian epics. Indian colors such as peacock blue, Indian red, etc., began to be used. Above all, the somewhat flat effect of the Persian style began to be replaced by the roundedness of Indian brush. So there was a freedom from the Persian influence, giving the pictures a 3D effect, three-dimensional effect. Mughal painting reached a climax under Jahangir, who had a very discriminating eye. It was a fashion in the Mughal school for the face, bodies, and feet of the people in a single picture to be painted by different artists. So everybody had like it was kind of a specialization kind of thing because the people who were good at making the eyes drew that, and the people who were good at making faces drew the rest of it. Jahangir claims that he could distinguish the work of each artist in a picture. Apart from the painting, Apart from painting hunting, battle, and court scenes under Jahangir, special progress was made in portrait painting and paintings of animals. Mansoor was the great name in this field. Portrait painting also became fashionable. Under Akbar, European paintings was introduced at the court by the Portuguese priests. Under their influence, the principles of foreshortening, whereby near and distant people and things could be placed in perspective, was quickly adopted. So the European style of painting was introduced under Akbar's reign. It was introduced by a Portuguese priest in his court, and under this, the principle of foreshortening, in which near and distant people and things could now be placed in perspective, was widely adopted. While the tradition continued under Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb's lack of interest in painting led to a dispersal of the artists to different places in the country. This helped in development of paintings in the states of Rajasthan and Punjab Hills. Rajasthan style of painting combined the themes and earlier traditions of Western India or Jain school of painting with Mughal forms. It was an amalgamation of Western Indian or Jain school of painting and the Mughal forms. Thus, in addition to hunting and court scenes, it had paintings on mythological themes such as the dalliance of Krishna with Radha or the Barha Masa, that is, the seasons or the ragas. The Pahari school continued these traditions, language, literature, and music. The important role of Persian and Sanskrit as vehicles of thought and government at the all India level and the development of regional languages largely as a result of the growth of the Bhakti movement have already been mentioned. Regional languages also developed due to the patronage extended to them by local and regional rulers. These trends continued during the 16th and 17th centuries. By the time of Akbar, knowledge of Persian has become so widespread in North India that he dispensed with tradition of keeping revenue records in the local language Hindavi in addition to Persian. So the local land records or revenue records were kept in local language which is Hindavi and also Persian. However, the tradition of keeping revenue records in the local language continued in the Deccani states till the extinction in the last quarter of the 17th century. Persian prose and poetry reached a climax in Akbar's reign. Abu Fazl, who was a great scholar and a stylist, as well as the leading historian of the age, set a style of prose writing which was emulated for many generations. The leading poet of the age was his brother Faizi, who also helped in Akbar's translation department. The translation of Mahabharat was carried out under his supervision. Utbi and Naziri were the two other leading Persian poets. Though born in Persia, they were among the many poets and scholars who migrated from Iran. to India during the period made the Mughal court one of the cultural centers of the Islamic world. Hindus also contributed to the growth of Persian literature. Apart from literary and historical works, a number of famous dictionaries of the Persian language were also completed during the period. Although not much significance and original work was done in Sanskrit during the period, the number of Sanskrit works produced during the period is quite impressive. As before, most of the works were produced in South and East India under the patronage of the local rulers, though a few were produced by Brahmanas employed in the translation department of the emperors. Regional languages acquired stability and maturity, and some of the finest lyrical poetry was produced during this period. The dalliance of Krishna and Radha and the milkmaids, pranks of the child Krishna, and the stories of Bhagavad figures largely in lyrical poetry in Bengali, Odia, Hindi, Rajasthani, and Gujarati during this period. Many devotional hymns to Ram and many devotional hymns to Ram were also composed, and the Ramayana and Mahabharata translated into the regional languages, especially if they had not been translated earlier. A few translations and adaptations from Persian were also made. Both Hindus and Muslims contributed in this. Thus, Alaul, composed in Bengali and also translated from Hindi, the Padmavat story written by Muslim Sufi saint Malik Muhammad Jaisi, who used the attack of Alauddin Khilji on Chittor as an allegory to expound Sufi ideas on the relations of soul with God, along with Hindu ideas about Maya. Medieval Hindi in the bridge form, that is the dialect spoken in the neighborhood of Agra, was also patronized by the Mughal emperors and Hindu rulers. From the time of Akbar, Hindi poets began to be attached to the Mughal court. A leading Mughal noble, Abdul Rahim Khan-e-Khanan, produced a fine blend of the Bhakti poetry with Persian ideas of life and human relations as the Persian and Hindi literary traditions began to influence each other. But the most influential Hindi poet was Tulsidas, whose hero was Ram and who used a dialect of Hindi spoken in the eastern parts of Uttar Pradesh around Banaras. Pleading for a modified caste system based not on birth but on individual qualities, Tulsi was essentially a humanistic poet who upheld family ideals and complete devotion to Ram as well as salvation open to all, irrespective of caste. In South India, Malayalam started its literary career as a separate language in its own right. Marathi reached its apogee at the hands of Eknath and Tukaram. Asserting the importance of Marathi, Eknath exclaims, if Sanskrit was made by God, was Prakrit born of thieves and knaves? Let these airings of vanity alone. God is no partisan of tongues. To him, Prakrit and Sanskrit are alike. My language, Marathi, is worth of expressing the high sentiments and is rich laden with the fruits of divine knowledge. This undoubtedly expresses the sentiments of all those writing in local languages. It also shows the confidence and the status acquired by these languages due to writings of the Sikh gurus. Punjabi received a new life. Music. Another branch of cultural life in which Hindus and Muslims cooperated was music. Akbar patronized Tansen of Gwalior, who is credited with composing many new melodies, rags. Jahangir and Shah Jahan, as well as many Mughal nobles, followed this example. There are many apocryphal stories about the burial of music by the Orthodox. Aurangzeb Aurangzeb was an orthodox in the field of painting as well as in music, and he was not very keen of providing patronage to these fields. Recent researches show that Aurangzeb banished singing from his court, but not performance of musical instruments. In fact, Aurangzeb himself was an accomplished veena player. Music in all forms continued to be patronized by the Aurangzeb queens in the harem and by the nobles. That is why the largest number of books on classical Indian music in Persian were written during the Aurangzeb's reign. So, although himself was not in favor of patronizing the music, but his queens and also the nobles were very keen of it, and you could see a large number of books on classical Indian music in Persian were written during his reign. But some of the most important developments in the field of music took place later on in the 18th century during the reign of Muhammad Shah. Religious ideas and beliefs and problems of integration. The Bhakti movement continued apace during the 16th and 17th centuries. Amongst the new movements was the Sikh movement in Punjab and what is called Maharashtra Dharma in Maharashtra. The Sikh movement had its origin with the preachings of Nanak, but its development is closely linked with the institution of Guruship. The first four Gurus continued in the tradition of quiet meditation and scholarship. Fifth Guru Arjun Das completed the compilation of the six scriptures called the Adi Granth or Granth Sahib to emphasize that the Guru combined both spiritual and worldly leadership in his person. He began to live in an aristocratic style. So, in order to emphasize that the Guru who has combined both the spiritual and worldly leadership together, he began to live in an aristocratic style. He erected lofty buildings at Amritsar, wore fine clothes, kept fine horses procured from Central Asia, and maintained retainers in attendance. He also started a system of collecting offerings from Sikhs at the rate of one tenth of their income. So, after compiling the four Granths, which became the Adi Granth or the Granth Sahib, Arjun Das ji uh, portrayed himself as the one who has emphasized the spiritual and uh, worldly leadership, and he began living an aristocratic lifestyle. So we could also see that he also started a system of collection where he collected offerings at the rate of one tenth of one's income from the Sikhs. Akbar had been deeply impressed with the Sikh Gurus and it is said visited them at Amritsar. However, clash began with the imprisonment and death of Guru Arjun by Jahangir on a charge by helping rebel Prince Khusro with money and prayers. His successor, Guru Hargobind, was also imprisoned for some time, but he was soon set free and developed good relations with Jahangir and accompanied him in his journey to Kashmir just before his death. But he came into clash with Shah Jahan on a hunting incident. By this time, the Guru had a sizable following, including a Pathan contingent led by Penda Khan. There were a series of skirmishes, and ultimately the Guru retired to the Punjab foothills where he was not interfered with. Thus, there was no atmosphere of confrontation between the Sikh and the Mughal rulers during this period, nor was there any systematic persecution of the Hindus, and hence no occasion for the Sikhs or any group or sect to stand forth as the champion of the Hindus against religious persecution. The occasional conflict between the Gurus and the Mughal rulers was personal and political rather than religious. Despite some display of orthodoxy by Shah Jahan at the beginning of his reign, and a few facts of intolerance such as the demolition of new temples, he was not narrow in his outlook, which was further tempered towards the end of his reign by the influence of his liberal son Dara. Dara, the eldest son of Shah Jahan, was by temperament a scholar and a Sufi who loved to discourse with religious divines. With the help of Brahmanas of Kashi, he got the Gita translated into Persian. But his most significant work was an anthology of the Vedas, in the introduction to which Dara declared the Vedas to be heavenly books in the point of time and in conformity with the Holy Quran, thus underlining belief that there was no fundamental difference between Hinduism and Islam. From Gujarat, another saint, Dadu, preached a non sectarian path, Nipak path. He refused to identify himself with either the Hindus or the Muslims or to bother with the revealed scriptures of the two, asserting the indivisibility of the Brahma or the supreme reality. The same liberal trend can be seen in the life and works of Tukaram, the supreme exponent of the Bhakti in Maharashtra at Pandharpur, which had become the center of Maharashtra Dharma and where worship of Vithoba, a form of Vishnu, had become popular. Tukaram, who states that he was born a Shudra, used to do puja to the god with his own hand. It was not to be expected that such ideas and practices would be easily accepted by the orthodox elements belonging to the two leading faiths, Hinduism and Islam, and thus giving up the entrenched position of power and influence which they enjoyed for a long time. The sentiments of the orthodox Hindus were echoed by Raghunandan of Navadvip, Nadia, in Bengal. Considered to be the most influential writer on the Dharma Shastra during the medieval period, Raghunandan asserted the privileges of Brahmanas, stating that none other except the Brahmanas had the right to read scriptures or to preach. He ends up by saying that in the Kali age there were only two ones, Brahmanas and Shudras. The two Kshatriyas have disappeared long ago, and the Vaishyas and others having lost their caste status due to the non-performance of appropriate duties. Ramanand of Maharashtra, while putting forward a philosophy of activism, was equally vehement in asserting the privileges of the Brahmanas. Among the Muslims too, while the trend of Tawheed continued apace and was supported by many leading Sufi saints, a small group of the Orthodox ulama reacted against it and the liberal policies of Akbar. The most renowned figure of the Muslim Orthodox and revivalist movement of the time was Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi, a follower of the Orthodox Naqshbandi school of Sufis, which had been introduced in India during Akbar's reign. Sheikh Ahmad Sirhindi opposed the concept of pantheistic mysticism, Tawheed. Pantheism is basically there is one God, or the belief in the unity of Godhead, denouncing it as un-Islamic. So he was basically an Orthodox, and He was kind of a revivalistic of Islam because he was trying to assert that there is no concept of Tawheed or pantheistic mysticism, and he only believed in the unity of God. He opposed. So sorry, I actually did it all wrong. So Sheikh Ahmad's Hindi was basically a Islamist revivalistic, and he denounced the practice of pantheistic mysticism, whereby he said that this theory of unity of Godhead was totally un-Islamic. He also opposed all those practices and beliefs which were due to the influence of Hinduism, such as the use of music in religious gatherings, sama, excessive meditation, visiting tombs of saints, etc. In order to assert the Islamic character of the state, he demanded reimposition of jizya, a stern attitude towards the Hindus and the minimum association with them by the Muslims. In order to implement this program, he started centers and also wrote letters to the emperor and to many nobles to win them over to his side. So he was basically a pure radical, and he wanted to assert the Islamic influence. And in such an attempt, he was trying to win over the nobles, and he asserted on the reimposition of jizya. Jizya was a tax on the Hindus, and he propagated the idea that the Hindus and Muslims should be as far as possible because there should be no association of the Hindus and Muslims. However, the ideas of Sheikh Ahmad had little impact. Jahangir imprisoned him for claiming a status beyond that of the Prophet and only released him after his retraction. Nor did Aurangzeb pay any special attention to his son and successor. It will thus be seen that the influences of the Orthodox thinkers and preachers was limited, being necessarily confined to narrow circles. Their chief hope was that their ideas would receive the support and backing of those who held positions of wealth and power in society and state. On the other hand, Liberal thinkers made their appeal to the broad masses. The recurrent cycles of liberalism and orthodoxy in Indian history should be seen against a situation which was rooted in the structure of the Indian society. It was one aspect of the struggle between the entrenched privilege and power on one hand and egalitarian and humanistic aspirations of the masses of people on the other. The prestige and influence of of the narrow orthodox elements and their reassertion of the narrow ideas and beliefs was a barrier to the growing process of reapproachment and tolerance among the votaries of two dominant religions, Hinduism and Islam, and a hindrance to the process of cultural integration. The clash between the two trends came to surface during Aurangzeb's reign. With this, we've come an end to this chapter. So I hope you would have liked it, and I'll see you guys in another video. Thank you. Bye.